Welcome to Everyone Belongs in the Outdoors, presented by Wilderness Inquiries and Strootman. This event is part of Whidbey Reads, an annual community reading event. Whidbey Reads is funded through generous donations from the Whidbey Community Foundation, the Clinton, Langley, Freeland, Coupeville, and Oak Harbor Friends of the Library groups, and is supported by the Sno-Isle Libraries Foundation. Our 2023 selection is The Music of Bees by Eileen Garvin. Contact your community library to request a copy. Visit our website for bonus resources and information about additional Whidbey Reads programs. Your mics are muted. Use chat to ask questions at any time during the program. Questions will be answered following the formal presentation. We will use chat on our end to share links to relevant resources. Wilderness Inquiry believes everyone belongs. They connect people of all ages, backgrounds, identities, and abilities through shared outdoor adventures so that all people can equitably experience the benefits of time spent in nature. Ann Strootman oversees Wilderness Inquiry's comprehensive registration and assessment process, working with participants of all abilities to find a trip to accommodate their interests and abilities. She also works to develop ongoing partnerships with organizations related to disability service so that their members and clients can experience the outdoors in a supported environment. Prior to joining the Wilderness Inquiry team, Ann worked in public education, focusing on operational management and academic intervention. Her work with students and families from diverse backgrounds and abilities meant she was well prepared to implement the Wilderness Inquiry mission. And now, here's Ann.
Great, thank you so much. And I am very excited to be here this evening. I am actually speaking to you from Minnesota. I live in the Twin Cities, and that is where Wilderness Inquiry is headquartered. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will start chatting about what it means to bring people into the outdoors from all backgrounds, abilities, and ages. So here we go. All right. So this presentation, we're really going to focus a lot on how to make the outdoors accessible, what it means to be traveling outdoors if you have a disability, and also what we do as an organization to make that happen. So as it was mentioned earlier, our mission is really to connect people of all ages, backgrounds, and identities and abilities. And the way that we do that is through shared outdoor adventures. So this can be anything from a quick, field trip with school students where they might be paddling on a river with us. They might be at a local park and we're teaching them a rotation of activities such as learning how to paddle, maybe building a fire, going on a nature hike, learning how to build a shelter, those sorts of skills, all the way up to an international adventure where we might be going on a safari to Africa. We might be hiking in Volcanoes National Park in Hawaii, or some things more in someone's back door. So maybe going to Olympic National Park, or in my case, going to northern Minnesota and enjoying the Boundary Waters. So a little bit about our organization. We were founded in 1978, so we've been around for quite a while. During that time, we've served over 500,000 people from all over the United States and from countries across the world. We are headquartered in the Twin Cities. That is we like to call it our global operations. That's where we launch our trips. We also have a base camp in northern Wisconsin in an area called the Apostle Islands. That's in the southern shoreline of Lake Superior. And part of what's really important to us is collaborating with other partnerships that have similar goals. So we have local partnerships, national partnerships, and even some international partners. So, what was the reason that our organization was founded? That's a really common question. And it really started with our founder in the late 70s. He was a college student, just about ready to graduate from college. His name is Greg Lace. At that time in Minnesota, there was a lot of discussion about the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. This is a huge wilderness area in northern Minnesota, right on the border with Canada. And it's a whole series of small lakes that are very close to one another. So what a lot of people will do is they will go canoeing on those lakes. And then there are some little trails called portages that you can carry your equipment across to get to the next lake. This wilderness area has been protected for a very long time. But there was a lot of discussion about, who was able to access this area. So the governor of Minnesota at that time, his name was Wendell Anderson, wanted to advocate that motorboats be allowed, and maybe that there should be some roads that go through the wilderness area. He felt that that would make it accessible for the handicapped, the elderly, and women, which I thought was a really interesting set of communities that he felt would not be able to access the wilderness. So our founder, Greg, decided, I'm going to prove this statement wrong. I'm going to bring some people who are handicapped, elderly, and by the way, I'll bring some women to the Boundary Waters and show him that we don't need to use any sort of mechanized vehicles. We don't need motors. We can paddle. We can get across those portages without making changes to the wilderness. And so that's what he did. He brought 10 people. He had individuals that had varying abilities. There were a couple of people using wheelchairs, someone with cerebral palsy, someone who was blind. And it was a pretty crazy first trip. He talks quite a bit about how it wasn't pretty, but they did it. In some cases, they were piggybacking people across the trails because they weren't able to walk. There was actually one woman on that trip who did not want to go to piggyback. She and her wheelchair would not make it across the rugged terrain. But she just was very determined that she was going to do it on her own. And so she literally crawled over some of the terrain in order to make it accessible for herself. So based on that experience, our organization was founded. Since that time, we've gone back to the Boundary Waters probably thousands of times. We've refined our methods so that we're not piggybacking people across the trail, but it was really just a way to prove that we don't necessarily have to change the wilderness to make it accessible. We just need to change the way that we interact with the wilderness. So here's just a couple of statistics. Americans who live with a disability, it's 26%. So it's a really large percentage of people living with disability. These are things that could be seen or unseen. A lot of times when we think about disabilities, we're thinking about someone who's using a wheelchair, or maybe somebody who has a visual impairment, things that you can really look at the person and see that they are interacting differently. But it's really important to understand as well that there are a lot of unseen disabilities that people may find challenging when they're in the wilderness. It could be a sensory issue where being in the wilderness, it could be really frightening. It could be someone who maybe doesn't walk the same as someone else. They can still walk, but maybe it's difficult for them to go for a long distance. The other thing to keep in mind too is that some people that maybe traditionally have the label of having a disability maybe don't feel that they do when they're with a community of their peers. So for example, we have a team member who is deaf. They feel they have a disability when they're with people who are hearing, but when they are part of the deaf community and using ASL for communication, they don't have any barriers. They don't have any disability in that realm. So we really work with our staff to recognize that there are varying types of abilities. Some are lifelong, some are temporary. And it really depends on what the setting is when you're working with them. So we really have this mantra and we live this out, that everyone belongs in the outdoors. So we feel it's really important that nature and all of its therapeutic benefits should be accessible to everyone. And we see our role as breaking down barriers, whether those are just perceived barriers, if they're real barriers. Even if it's a perceived barrier, it is real to that particular person. This quote is one of my favorite quotes from the last few years. This participant, Lynn, is living with a traumatic brain injury. And before she had that brain injury, she was very, very active in the outdoors. After her brain injury, she was having a lot of symptoms, a lot of balance issues, and she didn't think she would ever get a chance to go, for instance, canoeing in the Boundary Waters again. But she did. She came on a trip with us and she felt very well supported while she was on that trip. You can see by her quote that it was just not only an amazing memory from that, but now she feels like she has the confidence to do something similar again. In fact, I just talked to Lynn a few weeks ago and she's trying to decide which of the trips she wants to do this summer with us. So we feel really strongly that all of our programming is inclusive. So to us, that means that we're creating a safe place for all of the participants on our trips with us. That means meeting them where they're at. That could mean someone who has never slept in a tent before. We want them to feel comfortable. It can be a big step to sleep outside and sleep in a tent for the first time and maybe hear noises outside that you've never known were there. A lot of times we'll bring youth into the outdoors who maybe live in a city and haven't been camping, haven't been canoeing, and sleeping in a tent can be pretty intimidating. Likewise, maybe someone who uses a wheelchair hasn't gone camping before. They're going to have lots and lots of questions about, where am I going to sleep? How am I going to get in and out of the tent? Can I get in and out of a sleeping bag? What's it going to be like? And so we really try to meet people where they're at, answer their questions ahead of time so we can set some of those expectations and work with them to find, what are some of the supports that they need to be successful on a trip with us. Another part of inclusion is just really welcoming people of all backgrounds. We have made a lot of great strides in working with people of all backgrounds from all different age groups and work really hard to facilitate great, meaningful discussions throughout the trip. So that's something that we really believe strongly. So as part of the core of our mission, we do outdoor adventure travel. So we like to work with different communities on many different levels. And what we've done as part of our organization is kind of structured around these 4 core programs. The first one we call Share the Adventure. And this is really a chance for people of all backgrounds to come together on a trip. So we may send a group out to Glacier National Park, and we may have someone in their 70s going on that trip. We may have a couple in their 50s. We may have someone who is blind on that trip. All those people traveling together to experience the outdoors. The way that they experience the outdoors might be a little bit different from one another, but they're all getting a chance to experience it in whatever way is most comfortable for them and fits their ability. We also do a lot of travel with families. Our Families Together program, when we initially launched it, it was specifically for families where someone in the family had a disability. What we were finding is a lot of families, especially if they had a child with a disability, some cases the child with that disability would go away to a camp specifically to meet other kids with the same sort of disability, and the rest of the family would go on a vacation together. So they weren't really getting a chance to all bond together as a family. So we developed this Families Together program so that all the family members could join a trip, maybe meet other families that were experiencing disability as well, get a chance to connect and see their children interacting with one another all in the same space. At this point in time, it's Families Together means lots of different things to lots of different people. It's really, some families have disability, some don't. So we have lots of families that travel with us, and will come back year after year. They meet families that they meet, they meet families one year and then they have such a great time that they plan to meet again the following year on a different trip so that they can build connection. One of our newer programs that we've been expanding greatly are what we call our affinity trips. So as part of finding ways to meet people where they're at, we're finding a lot of people feel more comfortable traveling with people that are part of the same community. So for instance, we've been doing women's trips for a number of years, just kind of as standalones. We know that some women really want to experience the outdoors with other women. Maybe they want to just feel more comfortable, feel some of that girl power as they're out doing these outdoor adventures. So we've expanded on that. So now we have other affinity trips that are for the BIPOC community, the LGBTQIA community, and we have some disability groups that travel together as well. We have deaf and hard of hearing, we have neurodiverse trips. The unique thing about these affinity trips is that all of the leaders of the trip also identify as part of that same community. So if you're on a BIPOC trip with us, your leaders are going to be BIPOC. If you are a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community, you're going to be using ASL communication through the whole trip because your leaders are going to be either deaf or hard of hearing and also use ASL. So we find it's really empowering for these communities to come together and experience the outdoors, meeting each other and learning more about the outdoors. So this just kind of shows, this happens to be a group of individuals that went hiking in Utah a few years ago. And this family trip, we go paddling together on a local river called the St. Croix. You'll kind of notice in the background this large canoe. We have a whole fleet of 10-person North canoes that we designed to be extra stable. So they are ideal for first-time paddlers. The other nice thing when we do these paddling and camping trips is we can take the middle seats out and put a lot of gear in there. It makes it really great for families because a lot of times the young ones don't have a lot of paddling strength or get bored after paddling for a little bit of time. But because there's so many people paddling together, we can still make progress down the river. And here's just the slide showing our affinity trips. This one happens to be sea kayaking in the Apostle Islands. I believe this is part of our neurodiverse group. And then our last program that I didn't really touch on yet is called Canoe Mobile. We do a lot of programming with youth across the country and other organizations where we will partner, and we will bring those 10-person boats across the country. So for example, right now we have a rig out in California. So 6 of those large boats get trailered out to California, and our crew of 8 is working with youth in Sacramento, Santa Barbara. This is really a great example of a lot of things that they see on those trips. So for instance, if you look on the left, you can see that young woman looks quite terrified to be in a boat for the very first time. But by the end of her 15-20-minute paddle, you can see she's smiling, she's confident. So it's a chance for youth really to get a chance to see what is right in their own backyards, right in their back door. We also do a lot of STEM education. We'll have partners in the area, whether it's government agencies or other nonprofits, that will lead some land-based stations, learning about water quality, maybe learning how to build a fire, and maybe doing some team building activities as well. So it's a really great way for youth and other folks to get a chance to see what the outdoors is all about. So a lot of people ask us, well, why this connection in the wilderness? Because really, when it comes right down to it, we're just trying to connect people together to build community, and we're really using the wilderness as an avenue for that. We find that being in nature is a great way to kind of level the playing field. Nature really doesn't care who you are. Everybody's going to have to face the same external pressures when they're out in nature. But based on your own human experience and whatever your abilities are, you may interact with nature differently. So those interactions is really what brings people together in many, many very meaningful ways. So I'm going to share a little bit about, kind of the nuts and bolts of how to make the outdoors accessible so that, everyone can have a place. These are some of the ways that we train our staff and we work as an organization in order to serve people of all abilities. One of the things that we do is we always use very respectful language. We'll talk a little bit about person first language. We also really create a safe space. We know that not everyone has positive experiences in the outdoors for the first time. And so when they go traveling with us, we want to be able to make that as safe of an experience and a really comfortable experience for them. So because our ultimate goal is for everyone to want to come back. Or learn how to teach them enough skills so that they can go out into the wilderness on their own. And then the last piece I'll touch on is universal design. All right, so person first language. So this is a tool that we promote through our organization, in that rather than identifying somebody by their disability first, we identify the person first. So instead of saying that disabled person, we would say somebody experiencing disability or somebody with a disability. Instead of calling out that somebody is in a wheelchair, we will say that they use a wheelchair because they're a person who is using a wheelchair. One thing that I will address is that there has been a shift among some communities experiencing disability to kind of take ownership of their disability. So in some cases, a person may rather want to identify as their disability first. So we really model with our staff that as kind of our first line, we will do person first, but if the person lets you know that that's not what they prefer, then you need to really learn to switch your language. So it's really a great tool, and we really work really hard to make sure that we're getting to know our participants and know what works best for them. So I'm not going to go into great detail. It's probably hard to see what's on the right hand of your screen. But we have this method that we've developed over the years for, we call it social integration, or just having everybody come together as a group. So it's more a matter of group facilitation. But it's really talking about being respectful, having open lines of communication, incorporating all of our participants in decision-making, emphasizing all contributions. So for example, when we're setting up a campsite, we want everybody to cooperate together to set up that campsite. In the case of a family trip, for example, even the youngest child can find a task that is appropriate for them. We're not going to have that, 3-year-old go and help us light the fire, but maybe they can help us gather some firewood. We're not trying to invent things for people to do, but we're trying to find meaningful contributions for everyone. This picture on the left is a really great example of what we like to call symbiotic relations. So the person in the wheelchair was struggling to get up this rocky trail. And the person in the back has balance issues. So he needed something to hang on to in order to be successful on that trail. So the two of them working together are navigating this trail. The person who needs balance has enough strength to help push, and the person who is being pushed is providing a service by providing that balance. So we really work on our experiences to find the strengths that everyone can bring to the table so that everyone can contribute. Right, so I'm going to play this quick video. This was taken last summer. We do a fundraising event called the Great River Race. And we had some really great people joining us on the river, and I'll let the video kind of tell this story.
Our mission is really to connect people with one another and the natural world. It's really important for us to find these opportunities to support folks who experience some of the barriers to getting outdoors. We are committed to having staff members who represent these communities and identify with these communities. And so it does take an investment and a commitment, which we're happy to do. A lot of them have never floated on a river or a lake before, and so it's just a wonderful experience to provide those first-time opportunities for folks to do that. We couldn't do this kind of work without support from local communities, and there's been a long and strong support from the Smith McCarthy Fund to really lift up and provide these opportunities for people who are experiencing deafness and hard of hearing.
All right, so I have to say, every time I see that video, whoops, play again. Every time I play that video, I kind of get a tear in my eye. That video really highlights so many things about our organization and just the need that is out there in order to bring our mission to life. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to chat a little bit about some of the adaptations that we use, things that are available out there for folks that are looking to do some more adventuring, whether that's hiking, paddling, or just being outside. So this first slide about adaptations are things that we use in our base camp in the Apostle Islands. So about 10 years ago, we purchased some property and developed a fully accessible base camp. We use universal design principles, which really means that in order to make things accessible for somebody with a disability, it should also be accessible for everyone. So we try not to make things look like they're just there for somebody who has the need. We really want it to be very seamlessly provided. So a great example of that would be on the right part of the slide. You'll see we have platform tents. We have a ramp that goes up to those tents. That is really great for somebody who maybe has mobility issues. Rather than having to go up a step, they can just either wheel themselves up on that ramp, or they can use a walker, or if they have a cane. It works really well, and it works well for everyone. If I can go up a ramp versus going upstairs, it works great for me. The tents that we use also were very carefully selected. They're a little bit higher than what you might see in some wilderness settings. They're very nice because they're tall, so you don't have to bend over in order to go into them. So people who maybe have arthritis or back issues, bending over in a tent can be really uncomfortable. So this is one way that we can alleviate that for everyone. Inside the tents, we actually, for folks who need it, we have cots that we can provide so that gets you off the ground a little bit, makes it easier for somebody maybe, taking their shoes on and off, and just being more comfortable. We really want a first experience in the wilderness to be comfortable. On the two examples on the left-hand side, on the upper left, you'll see this is a kayak paddle, and it actually has an adaptive grip. So this is really important for somebody who maybe doesn't have strong grip strength, especially when we're paddling in Lake Superior. It's a very cold water lake. So a lot of times hands get really cold really quickly. So along with that grip strength, maybe if somebody has arthritis in their hands, this can be a great tool for them to use as well. And then in the lower left, we have a very low-tech way of making beach sand accessible for wheelchairs. I don't know if you all have this in the Pacific Northwest, but in Minnesota, when it's really snowy, especially in really windy areas, sometimes we'll put up what's called snow fencing. So that orange matting is actually just like plastic that has some little holes in it. In the wintertime, that helps keep snow from drifting across a roadway. But for us in the summer, we can lay that down on a beach, and it makes it much easier for a wheelchair to go across. And here's a few more photos from our base camp. We also have built some boardwalks connecting the campsites to one another. The other thing that is great, the Apostle Islands is actually a national lakeshore, and they really have a strong mission for accessibility. They've been building extra infrastructure throughout their park, adding more boardwalks. Even on some of the remote islands, they have some boardwalks built in. They have some structures that they've made sure are all accessible. So it's a really great, great work by the national park. We're actually partnering with them this year. They are raising some money to build a more accessible approach to one of the boat landings. Right now, to get down to see the sea caves, you have to go down a series of stairs, 45 stairs to go down. We have to carry people down those stairs right now. And so if the efforts are being made so that it will be an accessible ramp that goes down, I believe with some switchbacks so that the grade is correct. But it will open that area up for more independent travel. So the picture on the right, this is another type of paddling adaptation that we use. We actually have a group of youth with limb differences that come from a hospital in the Twin Cities that travel with us every summer in the Apostle Islands. Some of them are missing entire limbs, some have only partial limbs. And so, paddling can be a challenge if that limb happens to be your arm. So we have these paddles that can actually be attached to the forearm, and they can paddle using a single side. The other examples here on the upper left, that's an example of something that we do in the wintertime. I think the picture may be kind of small. I think I have another one coming up, but it's called a pulk sled. And it's basically a sled that can be pulled by somebody who is ambulatory. But the nice thing about that particular sled is it does have a covering over the front so that the person that is using it can stay warm, which is really important, especially in our cold winters in Minnesota. And then down on the lower left, we have an example of one of our international trip destinations. This is actually in Belize or Guatemala. We go to Tikal. And this person, her name is Janet. She has traveled with us in the upper Midwest, but also she's gone to Uganda with us. She's gone to Belize, but she happens to be a person who uses a wheelchair. And not a lot of the trails, especially internationally, are very accessible. So we use a piece of equipment that we developed. We like to call it the rickshaw. And essentially what it is it's two bars that connect to the wheelchair and the harness that the person who is doing the pulling wears. When those bars are connected to that waistband, it actually lifts the front of the wheelchairs off the ground, enabling it to go over a little bit more rough terrain. If we end up being on an elevated trail, sometimes a second person may push in the back to also help things along. So we got a couple of duplicates. I apologize in some of the photos. Looks like we've seen a couple of these already. Another piece of equipment down in the lower left. This is a paddling glove. This one actually has some Velcro so that it will go all the way around a paddle. So this would be a great one to use with a canoe paddle for paddling strength or paddling grip. Here in the two left side pictures, this is the same woman, Janet, when she went to Uganda to see gorillas in the jungle. So I know there's a lot of green in that photo, but if you look in the lower left, very left-hand side of the photo, there is a gorilla, trust me, a gorilla in a Ugandan jungle that she was able to get that close to. She was able to make that trek through a very thick jungle by sitting in the seat that you see on the upper left. We actually had two people, one on either side, holding that piece of equipment on their shoulders in order to get her through that thick jungle. Where there's a will, there's a way. We make it happen. So here's a couple of examples of some adaptive paddling seats that we use. The one on the left is made for a canoe. These are great for people that maybe don't have real trunk strength. So they maybe need some support on either side of them, and also, to help support the neck and the back. The important thing is for safety, we can't strap somebody into a boat, because if it were to tip over, we need them to be able to get out safely. So one way to kind of help secure somebody without them actually being strapped in is, in addition to the adaptive seats, sometimes we will put bolsters underneath legs for comfort, maybe some bolsters next to somebody's hip. So we've got a lot of different ways that we can make it comfortable for individuals. Same thing with the kayak. It's a similar type of seat. It just fits into a kayak a little differently than it does in a canoe. Here are a few more examples of the rickshaw that is used, that we use quite often with wheelchairs. The other thing that is a nice feature of this type of equipment is we can attach it right to an individual's own wheelchair. So, obviously wheelchairs are fitted to the person that is using them. So being able to attach it to their particular wheelchair is important for us. Oh boy, I have all kinds of duplicates. I apologize. There's another photo of that snow fencing being used on the sand. On the lower right is also another type of equipment that will do something similar to what the rickshaw does. Is it elevates the front of the wheelchair off the ground a little bit. And it has a larger wheel that can handle some of those uneven trails that you might be on. And then here's just a couple of examples of some different types of wheelchairs or all-terrain wheelchairs that are on the market. The one on the left is called a Joliet chair. So it has just one wheel on the bottom, but then you need two people, one in the front and one in the back, in order to pull and push and keep it balanced. We actually used this chair on a trip to Patagonia in 2019. There was a woman with ALS that joined us. And so it allowed her to be able to go on some pretty remote trails. The all-terrain wheelchair on the right is also a great example, just showing you can have different types of wheels that will make things accessible. And then here's a few more photos of a nice close-up of the winter polk sled. You can see the gentleman on the right got a chance to be in that polk sled and do some dog sledding with us. So every winter, we do some Boundary Waters winter trips. We stay in a lodge at night, so we're warm, but during the day, we get to do some outdoor adventures. Dog sledding and skiing and snowshoeing. For about 10 years, we've been partnering with a local residential home for people living with disability. And so they bring up a crew of probably 10 people with disability, and then some support caregivers who come along, and they get a chance to go snowshoeing. You know, quite a few of them use wheelchairs, and so we can still get them outside and participating. They're, you know, going sledding on the lake. They're getting a chance to go in a sauna. We even do a polar plunge. We'll get folks that are, you know, maybe use a wheelchair. They can go in the sauna, and we've been able to get them down into the cold water too. Not my favorite activity, but a lot of people swear by it, and it's quite the experience. So all of these adaptations and things that we do, we bring those to all of our destinations. One of the other things that is really important to us is, you know, not every need can be addressed with adaptive equipment. So we have a whole network of volunteers that come on trips with us to provide extra support. So as an example, on some of our neurodiverse affinity trips, we want to allow people the opportunity to travel independently, but they may need extra support. In the case of that particular affinity group, we may have some volunteers that come along to provide personal care reminders, you know, allowing our staff to think about the whole group, and then we might have individuals paired together, you know, asking, did you remember to pack your water bottle for the day? Did you put sunscreen on? You know, are you wearing shorts or pants today? Let's make sure it's appropriate for what the weather is going to be. And then also having to facilitate some discussion time. So, you know, making sure that everybody is feeling comfortable and included. Volunteers might also jump on a trip in order to help with wheelchair transfers in and out of boats, and maybe serving as a sighted guide. We also have a whole network of volunteer ASL interpreters that love to go on trips. We actually have a woman who is deaf who is joining us in Iceland this fall, and we have a volunteer ASL interpreter that will be going along as well to provide support. So these next few slides are going to kind of show some different destinations where we've brought people of all abilities. Apostle Islands is a great spot. We actually do some programming in your neck of the woods in Olympic National Park. I actually took this photo last fall. I was lucky enough to help lead a trip with disabled American veterans. So all of the individuals in this trip had varying types of disabilities, and we were able to have a fantastic time hiking, you know, and we're able to find ways to make hikes work for many different abilities. You know, some individuals were only able to go on shorter hikes, some wanted to do longer hikes. And so my co-leader and I were able to find the right trails that would fit their abilities. We'll do backpacking in the Beartooth Mountains. We'll go to Belize and Tikal. A very frequent location for us is the Boundary Waters. We get to some national parks. One place I haven't been that's on my list, I really want to go to Hawaii. We just had a group come back from Hawaii a few weeks ago. This is a really popular destination. We get to go to Volcanoes National Park on that trip. Iceland, you know, we talk about having people of all abilities, backgrounds, identities, and ages. And I tell participants when they're looking for trips that age is really just a number. We have people of all different ages on our trips with us. And, you know, not everybody's going to be able to do a 10-mile hike. So let's do a 3-mile hike today. Let's find a way that's going to fit everybody, you know, to what they're interested in doing. We do things on rivers. We get to New Zealand. We actually had a participant with us in December who was blind, who had an amazing time in New Zealand. we had somebody that was serving as her sighted guide on that trip who was able to give her visual descriptions as she was doing her hiking and provide some balance support for her. And she just felt it was a trip of a lifetime for her. We're hoping to get back to Peru next year. We do some local hiking trails. People always ask me what's my favorite destination, and I always say it's probably my next trip. In this case, I actually get the pleasure of going to Tanzania with our organization this summer. Actually, my parents registered for a trip and said, hey, why don't you come along? And I said, well, if you have to twist my arm, I guess I will. But my dad is going to be 81 this year, and he is ready and raring to go. So we're going to go do a safari in Tanzania, which is very exciting. Here's that great shot of Uganda with the gorillas. And here's Yellowstone National Park. One thing I will say about Yellowstone National Park is in our experience, Yellowstone is one of the most accessible parks in the country. They've done a really, really great job of having a lot of boardwalks available for pretty extensive distances, which is great. I've actually been chatting quite a bit. They have one of their park rangers who is their accessibility coordinator, and they really work to have conversations with people experiencing disability to find out what they need and what their wants are in the park. One thing that we've found just from different panel discussions that we've been a part of is, a lot of these national parks have a lot of things in place, but people just don't realize that they're there. So they're trying to do better about communicating what services they have, what accommodations they have available. So, it's great to have things in place, but if nobody knows about it, it's kind of a waste. So we're just excited that there's a real focus on it. All right, and then this last slide is my contact information. And I am going to stop sharing my screen so that we can do some questions if any came through.
Thank you for that, Anne. We have a comment from someone who says, thank you for recognizing that many of us prefer identity first language. And that's from Jay Johnson. We don't have any questions yet, so.
Okay.
It's a good time to drop those in chat. If you have a question for Anne, please do that.
And I am just looking at the chat. I am noticing that you did drop in some of the links, so thank you so much for that. So those are some really great resources. I will say that the Disabled Hikers organization is fantastic. They actually did a virtual program for us a few years ago, and I know they've come out with a recent guidebook of some very, different accessibility features of some trails in the Pacific Northwest. So that's a great resource.
We do have that book in our collection, so
awesome.
It's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to give you all a few moments to drop any questions that you might have for Anne in chat. It's okay if you don't have any. So your favorite destination, was it Tanzania?
Well, I haven't been there yet, so I always feel like whatever my next location is probably going to be my favorite. So the last larger trip I took was to Olympic National Park, which was amazing. So that was the first time I had been in the park, was last fall. And so you have a real gem, actually many gems in Washington State, which I've had the pleasure of getting to know a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you had a chance to do that. We agree. It is a little gem. Well, we have a question.
Here we go.
Oh, this is a good one. How do we reach you for upcoming trips?
Absolutely. So if you go to our website, there's a contact button that you can certainly reach out and ask questions that way. Also, I'm sure someone can drop my contact information in the chat as well. My role at the organization is I'm the customer service manager. So I primarily work with participants, answering questions about trips and our volunteers and working with disability organizations. So I'm always happy to find the right fit for people. Oh, lots of questions coming through
Yeah,
now.
this is great. Next question is, do you work with groups like Do It, etc., to get outdoors? There are a few groups in Washington state that work with disabled groups, but not sure what the status is after COVID.
Sure. I'm not familiar with Do It specifically, but we do work with a lot of organizations to do custom trips for their organizations. So, for example, the Disabled American Veterans have partnered with us to do a couple of trips again this year. In fact, we're coming back to Libby National Park, but that is one of the things that I take care of. I also have a partner who in the organization that works in that realm as well. And so if you look on our website and see a destination that looks interesting to you, reach out and we'll see if we can get something set up.
That sounds great. Next question. Oh, maybe. When looking for funding, support, etc., who are the stakeholders who take the most convincing to get on board with new ideas and programs?
That's a great question. We actually have a development team that does a lot of work in that area. We actually get quite a bit of support from our state, which is great. We have an environmental fund that is available in the state, and we've been lucky enough to receive some funding for that, specifically for youth. And I think this next funding cycle, we're trying to expand that to more family programming in the state. We also partner quite a bit with the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service. And so those granting or, those organizations and agencies really do see the value in helping people of all backgrounds get into the outdoors. So if you're looking for funding support, there's definitely interest out there. And to the question about, who takes the most convincing, if you have a really compelling story, it's well worth the time to go for it. We've found that by having participants who have been on trips with us that have really compelling stories, for them to testify on our behalf has been the most impactful for us. And then I did see a question there about scholarship options. We do have some scholarships available for people. We have a financial aid form on our website that people can apply for. We've had some families over the years that have had such great experiences with us that they've set up some endowment funding. And so that's where a lot of our scholarship funding comes from.
Thanks, Anne. Does each participant bring their own support people, or does the program supply them? It sounds like there might be a hybrid answer to that question.
Yeah, exactly. So we do kind of a combination. A lot of times if somebody has someone in their life that is a support giver for them, and if you feel comfortable with that person, by all means, we would love to have that person on a trip with you. But a lot of our participants just don't have that option available, and that's where we bring our volunteers in to do that. The other thing is we can use some of that scholarship funding to support that support person. So, if it's a matter of that barrier, we can usually work around that.
That's great. Next question. What is the best type of information for land managers to put on their website in regards to trails? Are there any key points we should cover so people with disabilities feel informed before going out on our trails?
Ooh, that's a really great big question. One thing that we've learned and heard for a lot of people is that each disability and each person's experience with a disability is so different. So, giving as much information up front is important. So things like the grade of any elevation change is important. What kinds of ruggedness is, on that trail. So are there lots of rocks or there roots? That's important. Even things like, are there any benches along the trail? So maybe somebody doesn't have difficulty on an even terrain, but they might have stamina issues. So they may need to know, how often can I rest? How often can I take a break if I'm going to do this trail? But what's really key is, the more information you can provide, then that person can make their own decision on whether it's a good fit for them, because they know what their abilities are. They just need to have the information up front. One way to kind of check that out too is if you look at that disabled hiker guide, some of the different things that they capture in that book or in that guide are the types of things that could be the information that you should be sharing.
Thanks, Anne. We've run out of questions. Are there any more? We had a little flurry there.
I know.
Anyone else? We'll just wait another moment just in case.
That's right. It's always that awkward, 10-second pause in webinar land that.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up this evening. Tammy says she loves what you're doing for inclusion. So
Thank you, Tammy. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. I was so impressed by your website. I was really thrilled that you were willing to come and talk to us at Sno-Isle Libraries for Whidbey Reads. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, feel free, anyone who's on, feel free to reach out to me directly at the email address that's there. I love to chat with people and find out what they are hoping to be able to do, and we really try to find ways to make it happen.
Thanks, Anne. Everyone, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at additional programs at Sno-Isle Libraries. Have a great evening. Good night.